Sixthly, nirvana is as vast as space. Nirvana is like space in that it permeates everything. It holds everything and has no boundaries whatsoever. And like space, nirvana depends on nothing, but everything actually depends on it. And seventhly, nirvana is like a Mani jewel. A Mani jewel is so magnificent that it inspires anyone who gazes upon it. The same goes to nirvana. It is so magnificent that even deluded beings can glimpse it from time to time and be profoundly inspired by it. And the eighth metaphor of nirvana is that nirvana is like sandalwood. Just as sandalwood is rare, so nirvana is rare. And just as sandalwood is more fragrant than any other wood, so the excellence of nirvana exceeds all other things. Number 9, nirvana is like the wind. Due to its unsurpassable magnificence, nirvana has a kind of attractive power that silently draws sentient beings towards it. Similarly, nirvana also has subtle power that pushes sentient beings toward it. And this is like the wind, which can carry a sailboat across the sea. Now the final metaphor of nirvana is that it is like a mountain peak. As nirvana is remote, singular, above and beyond all others, and thus it is said to be like a mountain peak. And like a mountain peak, its stern does not permit the seeds of defilement to grow upon it. Therefore, these are the 10 metaphors of nirvana, which can help us gain a better understanding of what it is like. And of course, there are also 4 different types of nirvana we need to be aware of. First of all, there is the original nirvana, which means it's the original or fundamental nature of everything. It is the Buddha mind in everyone. Secondly, there's nirvana with remainder. This means when an enlightened person, who still has a body, remains in the world with his past karma. And thirdly, there's what we call nirvana without remainder. And this refers to an enlightened being who no longer has a body. And fourthly, there is nirvana without abiding. And this is an enlightened being who could enter nirvana, but chooses to stay in the way to help other sentient beings. So through the 10 metaphors of nirvana and the 4 ways to understand nirvana, hopefully we can only gain a very, very basic idea of what the state may be like. But of course, we'd have to depend on ourselves to really experience what nirvana is like. And now after the Buddha points out that there is a solution, he then talks about ways to reach that solution, which is the 4th Noble Truths, the path to the end of suffering. In other words, this is a path or a way that leads to nirvana, or a passage between this shore and the far shore. This shore refers to the Saha world, or the world of suffering, while the far shore refers to the world of nirvana. And the 4th Noble Truth is a way that shows us how to overcome the causes of suffering. And basically when the Buddha taught this, he said to us that the most basic way to overcome suffering is to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path will also be a term that we'll be discussing in the program, but just in short, let's get some very basic ideas of what they consist of. First of all, there is right view, which means a proper understanding of cause and effect and the 4 Noble Truths, which explains life in this world as it really is. And after possessing right view, then we give rise to right thoughts, which are thoughts free from the 3 poisons and negative attitudes towards life. In other words, it should be thoughts that are positive and optimistic. And then there's right speech, which means not telling lies, not using idle talks, not using harsh or coarse language, and not using words that may cause disharmony amongst groups of people. And fourthly, there's right action, which means actions that are moral, honorable, and peaceful. Fifthly, there's right work, which means careers or jobs that do not bring harm to other people. And number 6, there is right progress, which means the will to prevent evil and allow wholesome states of mind to arise. Seventhly, there's right mindfulness, which means to be aware of the activities of the body, mind, thoughts, and conceptions, and so on. And number 8, there is right meditation, which means to focus calmly and peacefully on the ultimate truths. The Buddha basically introduced the Eightfold Noble Paths to show us a way that we can follow in putting an end to our sufferings. So this will be the 4th Noble Truth. Okay, now we have looked at each of the 4 Noble Truths in detail. Let's now talk a little bit about the importance of the 4 Noble Truths. Why are the 4 Noble Truths so important? This is a question we may now have. Well, for one thing, they are important because they were the first teachings spoken by the Buddha or expounded by the Buddha. And it is also one of the final words spoken by the Buddha before he entered Nirvana, where the Buddha said to his disciples, "Speak up and have questions about doubts or the validity of the 4 Noble Truths before it's too late." And in the fact that this was what the Buddha first spoke of, and what he spoke of right before he entered Nirvana, we can see the close attention which the Buddha paid to the 4 Noble Truths throughout the 49 years of his teaching. And as we look at the 4 Noble Truths, we can also see that they are divided into the 3 turnings of the Dharma wheel. So basically, the Buddha's years of teachings are divided into the 3 periods to help us understand the fullness of his message. And first of all, there is the first turning of the Dharma wheel. It is also known as the explanatory turning of the wheel, where the Buddha explained the basic truths upon which his enlightenment was based. So this was the first turning. And then in the second turning of the Dharma wheel, it is also known as the persuasive turning of the wheel, where the Buddha persuaded his disciples to end their suffering by fully understanding the 4 Noble Truths. And in the third turning of the Dharma wheel, which is also known as self-proved turning of the wheel, the Buddha had used himself as an example of someone who has attained enlightenment. Basically, he told everybody, "I can do it, so can all of you." Therefore, throughout all of these 3 stages, we can see the emphasis that which he had placed onto the 4 Noble Truths. And in conclusion, as we look at the 4 Noble Truths, we can pretty much regard the Buddha as the doctor who cures our diseased attachment to delusion. And his medicine for such an illness for us was exactly the 4 Noble Truths. In other words, he introduced this to us as a way to end our illness or our deluded mind. And what we need to do now is simply take the medicine which he has given to us. And remember, the best way to understand how to end suffering is to understand the 4 Noble Truths, which means the fact that we need to understand that there is suffering in life, or what suffering is about, as well as how suffering actually comes about. And next thing we need to realize is that what it is like when suffering actually ends. So to get an idea of the fact that there is an end to the suffering and what it actually feels or looks like. And finally, we tackle the problem by actually finding ways to end this suffering. So recognize the problem, recognize the cause of this problem, realizing that there is a solution to the problem, and then actually apply the possible solutions to achieve the end of this problem. This is what the Noble Truth has tried to teach us as a way to look at this world. In other words, the 4 Noble Truths is the most fundamental teaching of Buddhism, which cannot be fully explained within this short hour. But if there's a chance in the future, we should be able to tackle some of the more detailed parts of this very first teaching of the Buddha. So as a way to end today's session, let's spend a little bit of time revising what we have talked about today. So today we have discussed the Four Noble Truths. And they consist of, first of all, the truth of suffering. Second, the truth of the cause of suffering. Thirdly, the truth of the end of suffering. And fourthly, the truth of the way that leads to the end of suffering. And the Four Noble Truths is important because it helps us apply dependent origination to life. And it is also important because it was the first teachings and final teachings expounded by the Buddha. And what it helps us to do is to fully recognize the real problems that we face in this world and find ways to deal with them. So all of this is something which we need to bear in mind. And so thank you for joining us for this special session, and we'll see you next time.